Finally, the book of Ruth is meant to trace for us the family lineage of King David, who becomes the line that leads us to King Jesus. This is the most important theme in Ruth. And this is why the finale of Ruth ends with a genealogy that ends with King David. I want you to imagine the end of Ruth with this genealogy to be the credits that roll after a film. Okay, they're the credits that roll after a film. Well, what is so important about credits that roll after a film? Well, the credits give credit to whom it is due. They also name the real people who existed behind the scenes of that story. Likewise, even though Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz are very real people in history, they're acting out for us an even more important role in order to give credit to this genealogy of people at the end, mainly King David, who we know gives birth to King Jesus. And so the genealogy at the end is like the credits that roll after a story. It gives credit to where credit is due. It's the story of how King David is coming into the world. And what's so really significant about King David? King David represents King Jesus. It's the line that brings us Jesus. But in order to really find the final credits that make Ruth meaningful, we have to stay for the ending. We have to let the credits continue to roll. We have to be patient because we really only know that Jesus is totally in Ruth if we keep on reading in the Old Testament. We get to Matthew. And it's in Matthew and his genealogy, which I believe is printed in your bulletin, where he says that Ruth, or Boaz through Ruth, gave birth to Obed, who gave birth to Jesse, who gave birth to David, who eventually leads us to Mary, or Joseph through Mary, who gives birth to Jesus. And so we know that then Jesus is the ultimate one who is responsible for this love story of Ruth. But if we aren't careful, we might skip over the one name to whom all credit is most due in Ruth for producing this love story. We might skip the one producer and the one director of the story if we don't have a relationship with the man Jesus. Let me tell you what I mean. So when I watch a movie, I almost always skip the credits, and I zone out because I don't know anybody in those credits. But there's only been like one time in my life where I actually stuck around to actually read the credits because I knew somebody. If you know somebody from the credits, then you're going to stick around and you're going to look for them because you know they were important in lighting or sound or maybe a main character. And then you want to stick around because you're excited about seeing the credit that they deserve behind the scenes. Nobody knows they're there except for you because you have a relationship with the person. Well, the story of Ruth and every other book in the Bible, for that matter, should function the same way for us. If you have a relationship with Jesus, then the genealogy that rolls past the last scene of Ruth is going to be very significant to you. So significant that you will wait forever just in order to find the credit to where the credit is due for the story of Ruth. Well, Jesus is the man who deserves all of the credit for the story of Ruth. He's the one who brings hope out of despair, joy out of tragedy, fullness out of emptiness, life from death. He's the one who redeems in Ruth by using Boaz. He's the one whose hand is working behind the scenes by bringing conception. And Jesus is the real citizen in the story of Ruth that we should be looking towards, because just as Ruth gives birth to a boy in Bethlehem and names him Boaz, we know that Mary gives birth to a boy in Bethlehem and names him Jesus. And Obed is dead, but Jesus is still alive. And so he's the name that we can still give credit to right now instead of all of these other characters. So to celebrate the book of Ruth means that we celebrate the life of Jesus because he's the only one that is still alive. And I want to suggest that the author of Ruth's love story still has a heart beating and his hand ready to cast you into the love story that he still writes. Because remember, Ruth is a shadow story about a greater love story. And so that the same author of Ruth and the man who deserves all the credit for Ruth wants to use you in his story, like Ruth, in order to expose Jesus into the world and bring Jesus into the world into other people's lives. So how do we do that? How can God use us like Ruth and allow us to enter into this story? Well, I want to suggest we have to do what Ruth did in order to make this love story possible. Like I said, the pivotal moment in Ruth is in verses 16 and 17, where she makes a stunning profession of faith. And in order for us to be active in a part of God's love story, in bringing Jesus into the world and advancing the goal of Jesus and the reputation of Jesus, we need to make the same stunning profession of faith that Ruth makes, that allows this love story to unfold, which is, where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more, also if anything but death parts me from you. What was Ruth really saying here? She was saying that she wanted to have a relationship with God as story director. Let your God be my God. And she wanted to participate with God's people as the cast. And if it wasn't Ruth participating with God and his cast, she couldn't have been directed by God to really make a difference or find Boaz. And I want to suggest for us, if we're going to be active in God's story, God's going to use us like Ruth. We need to make this stunning profession of faith and say, God, you are my God and your people are my people. I commit myself to you and I commit myself to your church, because it's through God's church, right, through the manifold wisdom of God. Ephesians 3 says that God progresses his plan. So if we want to be active in God's love story, active, not just sitting on the sidelines or watching it, then we need to make this stunning profession like Ruth did and say, your God will be my God and your people will be my people.